Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Phil Haisler, Cabinet Member for Planning, Parking, Highways and Transport. Thank you ever so much for joining us this evening to start thinking about preparing the South West Maidenhead Development Framework Supplementary Planning Document, SPD for short, a document that will develop our placemaking aspirations for the South West Maidenhead area. This is the second of 3 events, starting to explore the issues and helping us develop the thinking. Tonight, we will be focusing on the issue of connectivity. The scope and location of South West Maidenhead development area provides an opportunity to help meet our borough's considerable housing and other needs in a coordinated, comprehensive and more sustainable way by delivering the right mix of homes, including much needed family and affordable housing. It also provides an opportunity to deliver a high quality environment, maintaining a high quality of life, one that's well integrated into the existing community, benefits from the right balance of on-site community facilities and infrastructure, together with new employment space, improved walking and connectivity, and enhanced public access to open space that everyone can enjoy. This is preferable to alternative of speculative and piecemeal developments well away from towns and villages within the Greenbelt, but pressure on services and facilities in those communities. As with all development areas of any size, there is always a balance to strike within practical constraints in order to meet local needs. The preparation of the Borough Local Plan itself has involved careful and sometimes challenging decisions that balance needs and requirements, not least in relation to the South West Maidenhead area, bearing in mind the requirement to meet our considerable housing needs. The adopted Borough Local Plan has set the vision to create a rounded, high-quality place where people will want to live and enjoy living. My important message to everyone is that I would encourage you, as we move on to the next stage in the planning process, to please get involved in helping to inform not just the SPD for the area, but the planning applications that will come forward to ensure that the vision for a high quality place becomes reality. After the upcoming presentation, there will be an opportunity to submit written questions via Teams for the planning officers to kindly answer during the event. After the event, please submit your comments and feedback via the form on the council website, so they can be fed into the SPD process. A link to the webpage will be placed in the chat. We welcome constructive engagement to ensure we fully capture and understand the key considerations in preparing the SPD. And please submit comments by the 27th of April 2022. Now, we've got a lot to cover tonight, and we are aiming to conclude this session at 8 p.m. and any unanswered questions will be posted on the council website. I'm now going to hand over to Ian Manctelo to set the scene for the preparing SPD. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haisler, and good evening, everyone. As Councillor Haisler said, I've just got a short presentation to sort of set the scene, in particular around the local plan and what the local plan says about the South West Maidenhead area. So I'm going to just put the presentation up now, and if a colleague can perhaps just confirm that they can see the presentation. So yes, as said, I'm Ian Manctelo. I'm a Principal Planning Officer in the Planning Policy team at the Royal Borough. And as I'm sure you'll probably be aware, this is the second of 3 sessions that we're holding over the last couple of weeks and this week to come, concerning the South West Maidenhead area and the preparation of the Supplementary Planning Document, or SPD. And there's one more session to come next week on sustainability and environment. Do please join us for that too. The purpose of these sessions really is to, I suppose, help us understand the issues and to inform the preparation of the SPD, to help develop our placemaking aspirations for the area for South West Maidenhead, and to share some initial thoughts and ideas around what might go into the SPD. I think it's a good opportunity as well to take stock and I suppose just remind us of what the new borough local plan says about the South West Maidenhead area, and in particular what the particular sites are and the proposals for those sites as a starting point for preparing the SPD. And I think it's a good opportunity for you to share with us what's most important to you, particularly in relation to the three themes that we're exploring in these 3 sessions. Briefly, in terms of the format of the session, firstly there's the scene setting presentation which I'll run through, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers in the chat bar, and not just questions, feel free to make comments as well in the chat bar, because we'll capture all of those comments after the meeting, after the session as well. The theme then of the evening following the scene setting is a presentation on connectivity. Now, that presentation was going to be given by Chris Joyce, who's our Head of Infrastructure, Sustainability and Economic Growth, but unfortunately Chris has got a family emergency that's just happened very recently, so I will just stand in and share Chris's presentation. I do apologise that Chris can't be with us, but there's a genuine emergency he has to attend to. So I will share his presentation, and then we'll have a second session of question and answer after I've shared that presentation. And then towards the end, I'll just set out a couple of slides to explain the next steps. Feedback, yes, through the chat bar tonight, both in terms of questions and your comments. But as Councillor Hayes has also said, there is a response form online. Comments are required by the 27th of April, and we'll provide the details and the web link to that at the end of the session. Just a few other things to note about the session tonight. Firstly, we are recording the session, so we do have a full record of the meeting, and we'll publish that recording in the morning. So after the session. We will capture all the questions and all the comments that you have put into the chat bar, but obviously there is that online response form as well for further comment, and there is an FAQ section on the website as well, where you can, there are other sort of questions and answers you may want to dip into to just help understand the issues a little bit more. We do have some other officers on the call tonight who will be helping answer the questions. We may not be able to answer all of them tonight, but we will provide written answers on the website in due course if we haven't answered them tonight. So, and the presentation and the recording, as I said, will both be made available on the website. Moving on briefly then to look at the local plan. Clearly the local plan was adopted back in February, and it delivers much needed land for housing and jobs. It protects green areas, and it plans for the infrastructure to support that development that's set out in the plan. We believe it delivers sustainable development over the next decade or so for the borough. It is a key plan in that sense, and it's a key plan because it guides and shapes our day-to-day planning decisions. It's really the most important document to guide our planning decisions on individual planning applications. So really important. And from the point of view of South West Maidenhead and the work on the SPD, it also provides the framework and the policies within which we prepare the supplementary planning document. I'll explain a bit more about what the SPD does in a few moments. The other thing just to mention is you may be aware of the issue of a legal challenge in relation to the local plan. So after a local plan is adopted, there is a 6-week period for persons who are grieved by the plan to make an application to the High Court. The council has been notified that the claim regarding adoption of the plan has been lodged with the court. The adopted borough local plan continues to have full weight in the planning process, and this challenge does not affect the work being undertaken on the SPD. And clearly, because there are legal proceedings, we cannot comment any more on this evening. So just so you're aware of that situation. So why are we producing a framework SPD? Well, the local plan actually provides a good amount of detail about the South West Maidenhead area and the sites within it, but the SPD really adds the next level of detail to the plan. So what it's trying to do in particular is set out how there can be a comprehensive approach to the development of the area and ensure that there is timely and coordinated delivery of all the necessary infrastructure to accommodate the housing and employment growth that the area is planned to accommodate. So it will provide more detail to help guide planning applications and include some design principles, but what it doesn't do is go as far as trying to actually design the site. It will include an illustrative master plan. So it won't include everything, and the full detail of the planning of the design of the individual sites and areas will come through the planning application stage. And it's really important to note that the SPD provides more detailed guidance to supplement the local plan policy. It doesn't try to rewrite the policy or change the policy. It doesn't try to, and it can't write new policy. So it's important that it sits within the framework of existing policy in the local plan. So if that's helpful just to understand where this work fits in the overall planning process. So the overall planning process for the area started with the borough local plan. That sets out the main policies and the main requirements for South West Maidenhead. Obviously, there's a plan overall for the borough. It sets out where development is going to happen and where it's not going to happen. And that was clearly adopted earlier this year. And the SPD now provides that next level of detail, the illustrative master plan, the guidance to show how we deliver those policies and those requirements. But that's not then the end of it, because planning applications will then come forward that will deal with the detailed design and layout. That's where you'll see the precise quantity of development that is being proposed on sites and areas as well. And clearly, alongside those three different elements of the planning process, there has been and will be consultation and engagement. So consultation on the local plan, including work on a placemaking study. Obviously, the conversations and engagement we're doing now, and then when we get to the summer, we aim to have a draft SPD published for consultation, so that will then provide more detail for you to look at that stage and comment on. And even when the SPD is approved, then there will be opportunities when planning applications come through to comment and engage with the developers on those. And particularly developers will normally undertake what's called pre-application engagement, so they'll share their thinking and their potential schemes before they actually submit their planning applications, and be a chance to look at those then and comment, as well as comment more formally when we consult on planning applications once they are submitted. So this is part of an ongoing process, both of gradually getting into more detail for the area and obviously opportunities and different opportunities to comment at different stages. So what area will the supplementary planning document cover? So this sort of diagrammatic map will hopefully just orientate you a little bit. The SPD will really cover an area between the town centre at the north and the railway station, bounded at the top end of the site, and the M4 and junction 8-9 to the south. And it includes within the area that's shown in that red line, that is the area for the SPD. It includes two main development sites, the housing site, which includes not just the golf course, but land to the south of Harvest Hill Road. And then on the other side of the A308M, it includes an employment site or an area for industrial and warehousing development, sites reference AL14. There's another site allocated in the plan, which is Bradwood Park, but that is essentially an area for green infrastructure and sport and leisure. So the intention is not to be building houses or industrial development there, but clearly the connections to both Bradwood Park and also to Otwell's Park is going to be really important in terms of the wider planning of this area, which is why both of those areas are included within the area that the SPD will cover. And really the starting point for preparing a plan, preparing the SPD, is ensuring that we do understand the issues, and that's why we're sharing and welcome your feedback at this early stage. Having said that, we've obviously we're not starting from scratch here, because a lot of work was done to understand the issues and understand the particular constraints of the area as part of preparing the local plan. That included the placemaking study that I mentioned briefly earlier, and there was an element of engagement on that study, and there was a wide range of issues identified through that exercise that we're aware of, that informed some of the detail that's gone into the local plan, and you can see a few listed there which I won't run through, but you can see that placemaking study report on the website on the South West Maidenhead SPD page. But part of the point of having the conversations over these weeks is to just see if there are other issues that we've not identified, and to understand perhaps what you consider the most important issues for us to think about. So just moving on to what the local plan does say about the placemaking area that will be the subject of the SPD. It's really broken down into both strategic and more detail. So there is a vision set out in the local plan for the South West Maidenhead area, and perhaps particularly importantly, a strategic policy. And that sets out a number of key principles and requirements that you can see listed on the right-hand side of the slide there. I guess perhaps most important all of those is that that development delivers a comprehensive and coordinated approach to development. And that is an important role for the SPD to try and assist in that process, but also that we see a high quality and sustainable development and secure a good balance and a balanced community in terms of the nature of what is provided on the sites. And alongside the development, to make sure that the right infrastructure is provided at the right time. And that again is an important role for the SPD to help with that sort of process. And yes, there are a range of issues that are set out in that policy that are guiding principles for as we do more detailed work on the area. At the next sort of level down, there are individual site pro formas set out in the local plan. They're in Appendix C of the plan, and there are pro formas for each of those 3 sites that are shown in the map I just had up. And particularly important are the pro formas for the housing site, AL13, and the triangle site, AL14. And they are site-specific requirements and principles to be followed in bringing forward detailed proposals for those sites and areas. And just briefly touching on what's in those, they are lengthy pro formas. They have something like 30 odd principles or requirements set out in them, so I'm not going to attempt to go through them all and list them all, but the slide just gives you a flavour of some of the things that they cover, and they do broadly break down into the sort of 3 themes that we're looking at in these sessions. So in relation to community needs that we considered in the first session, the fact that there should be 2 distinct neighbourhoods, there should be a local centre, primary and secondary school on the site, provision of affordable housing and that sort of thing. There's then various principles around access to and within the site, so walking and cycling, vehicular access, public transport are all covered in the pro forma for the housing site. And then the importance of green and blue infrastructure, open space, landscape buffers, and certainly biodiversity is really important too. So lots of principles set down, and in a way the role of the SPD is to then try and explain in more detail how they may be delivered through the planning process in sort of more detail. Overall, the housing site's intended to deliver approximately 2,600 homes. It's a big site, 90 hectares, about 225 acres in old money. But those are just a few of the principles, and you'll see all of them in the plan itself. Then there are pro formas for the triangle site in Bradwood Park. I think perhaps the key thing to highlight on the triangle site is that not all of that site is developable, partly because of where the greenbelt boundary is drawn, partly because of perhaps higher level of constraints in relation to flooding in particular. So that will limit the extent of development on the site, and clearly that's an important issue to work through. But again, lots of principles and requirements set down for that site. In relation to Bradwood Park, the connectivity issue is really the key thing, and how that links to the housing area on the other side of Bradwood Road is perhaps the most important principle that we need to be considering through this process. So at this point, I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ian Gillespie, who will, I think, has been starting to look through the questions in the chat bar, and we'll start to try and answer some of those at this point in time. So thank you very much.
Sorry, I'll start again. I was muted there. Good evening, everyone. Ian Gillespie. I've been keeping an eye on the questions as they've been coming through, and we'll try and address those now. Quite a bit of questioning around the level of housing provision on the site overall, the balance between flats and houses, and the height of the development, and whether restrictions will be imposed on the height across the allocation. So I can have a go at answering that one and hopefully provide some clarification. So the AL13 allocation in the local plan was originally a couple of sites. It's now a single allocation, and overall it is to provide 2,600 new homes or thereabouts. And as set out in the previous engagement session, we think there'll be a broadly equal split between flats and houses within that 2,600 units overall. And again, I think as I explained at the previous engagement session, there will be different character areas within the allocation. So the northern part of the site, northern part of the golf course site, which is closest to the town centre, is likely to be predominantly flatted development. And then as you work your way down through the site, there will be a greater mix of unit types with flats and houses. And the land south of Harvest Hill Road is likely to be mainly family housing with gardens. In terms of the heights, so there is some guidance on heights and development density in the adopted local plan. So at the back of the local plan there are pro formas for each of the development sites, and for AL13 it does talk about the northern neighbourhood being orientated towards the town centre, and that here building heights and densities will reflect those in the town centre. And then it talks about building heights of between 4 to 6 stories in and around the local centre just north of Harvest Hill Road. So that's as set out in the adopted local plan. We've then got a question that's come in around green corridors for wildlife. And that's something we'll be picking up in more detail in the third engagement session. But yes, certainly we have the green spine principle that's in the local plan running north south down through the site. That is a movement corridor, but it's also a wildlife corridor, and we are certainly wanting to look at the connectivity between habitats within the site. And there is an area of green running along the southern boundary of the land south of Harvest Hill Road, which we think would provide connectivity across several development areas. We've then got a question around the plan not protecting green areas, and with Maidenhead losing close to half of its green belts. Ian Motchell, do you want to pick that question up, please?
Certainly. Thanks, Ian. Yes, Ian Motchell, Planning Policy Manager. Welcome everybody to this event. So in terms of the green belt, I think the first thing to say is that well, all of the borough except for the larger towns is green belt. So the green belt doesn't really belong to any particular one settlement. Maidenhead doesn't have its own green belt. It just happens to be land that's between the settlements. So I don't think it's right to say that Maidenhead in itself is losing half of its green belt. I mean, overall, only 1% of the green belt in the Royal Borough has been lost. So previously it was 83% and it's now 82%. So a relatively small amount has had to be used to meet the development needs of the borough. I mean, turning to green areas, I think we would acknowledge that obviously some of that green area is going to be developed on. However, the pro forma, as Ian just said, the pro forma does require areas of strategic green space, and as well as more localised green space throughout the site, green and blue infrastructure, as well as the green spine that will run through the site. So we have put those requirements firmly into the pro forma, and I'm sure they will be picked up in the SPD as well.
Thank you, Ian. There's then a question which I think is around the opportunity for members of the public to have a meeting before any planning application is submitted. So I think I can help with that one, just in terms of the overall process. So at the moment, we're at the engagement stage and wanting to hear views and to hopefully answer questions around the drafting of the SPD for South West Maidenhead. And then over the summertime, we are hoping to have a draft SPD available for consultation. And we haven't finalised the consultation arrangements yet, but there will be opportunities to have face-to-face meetings with the planning team as part of that consultation process. I think further details to follow. And then there's reference to meetings that are nothing to do with the developers. So that's the SPD process, which will be meeting with the council team. But then I think we've mentioned previously that prior to any planning applications being submitted, the developers are likely to have their own community engagement sessions about their planning application proposals. And then once those planning applications are submitted, there will be an opportunity to make comments on those proposals, as there is with any planning application process. There's a question here around how can we reduce climate change or address climate change and other environmental impacts when we are destroying so many mature trees, and also the development resulting in the loss of so much green space. Again, I think we'll be picking up the issue around loss of trees in more detail in the third session, but this is a consideration, I suppose, around not just the environmental aspects of sustainable development, but also around the economic, and I think in particular that the social aspects of sustainable development. So we do need to provide more housing for local residents. That's one of the main purposes of the local plan process, and we went through a very stringent site selection process looking at the environmental, social and economic impacts of all of the various options that were available, and the options that are presented, including the allocation of South West Maidenhead, were included in the draft local plan that was then subject to independent examination. And I think there were various times in the examination process for that local plan where we were talking about difficult decisions needing to be made. There are no easy answers, and I think the role of this SPD process now really is to see where there are adverse negative impacts arising from the development, how they can best be mitigated through guidance in the SPD process, but then obviously at the planning application stage. There's a question around do we still intend to pedestrianise the station end of Schopenhangers Road? Ian Manctillo, I think that's one of the questions we had at the first session, and I think we've got a response from Project Centre on that.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. So no, there is no intention to pedestrianise the station end of Schopenhangers Road. No, it won't be pedestrianised. And I think the intention is that that there would not be a site vehicular access from Rushington Avenue into the site and across to Schopenhangers. So in terms of vehicle access at that end of the site, it would be through the existing access into the golf causeway, the clubhouse area, the golf course where the existing access is into shopping hangars, but that wouldn't connect through to Washington Avenue.
Thank you, Ian. We then have a question around active travel, and specifically around there being no active travel signage or route markers from the station to Rbwm Leisure Centre, and also issues around bike racks and the suitability of the pavements for use by pedestrians and cyclists. And those issues are certainly all matters that we will be looking to pick up in the SPD. The location of AL13 certainly lends itself to pedestrian and cycle movement, both to the facilities and services that will be provided within the development, including the 2 new schools and the new local centre, but it's also very well located in terms of access to the town centre facilities and services. So that's something that we will certainly be focusing on through the SPD process. There's a question around whether all of the flats and houses are needed, and I think it's fair to say that that particular line of questioning was discussed at length through the local plan examination process, and the scale of development that we're needing to accommodate in the Royal Borough was agreed by the independent planning inspector. And then there's a further supplementary question here, I think, around building heights, particularly on the northern part of the golf course site. That there isn't specific guidance at the moment, but there will be a building heights and tall buildings SPD that the council are preparing, which will work alongside a policy in the local plan which deals with building heights generally, and those 2 documents will inform the appropriate heights on the northern part of the golf course site, but there isn't a figure which I can point you to at the moment, I'm afraid. And then we've got, is this a tick box exercise, just so the council can say that they've consulted with the public? I can say categorically no. I think the other part to add to that, though, is that we have got already in the local plan quite a strong planning framework for the development of Southwest Maidenhead. So if you haven't already seen it, there are a series of pro formas at the back of the local plan, which do set out in a reasonable level of detail what the site needs to provide and some broad parameters in terms of requirements. So we're not starting with a blank sheet of paper, but we are very interested to receive comments, questions and feedback on this, well, at this very early stage in the SPD process, and again in due course in the summer when we have a draft SPD. I think these are further comments. And then we have a question on AL14, concerns around the high volume of traffic through Hollyport on the A330, which is a conservation area, and also the impact of that traffic in combination with other developments, including Gillett's Hill. It's quite a long question, this, and also some questions around the impacts on junction 8, 9. Ian, I don't know if Ian Manxillo, do you want to help out on that one in terms of the traffic modelling that's been undertaken?
What I'll do actually is I'll pick it up in the presentation. I'll do in a minute, but if necessary we can come back to it once I've done the presentation. Once I've said what I said, if you like, there may be sort of a follow-up from the person asking the question, so perhaps we'll cover it in that way. Yeah.
sorry, I'm having to read some of these questions live as we're here. So there's a question around the council's climate and environment strategy, stating that we will reduce the need for carbon intensive travel by encouraging walking and cycling, and that we will create conditions for sustainable travel through the provision of infrastructure such as cycle routes and electric vehicle charging points. How are you going to do this in Southwest Maidenhead? Well, I think, again, Ian, you're probably picking up some of this in your presentation, which is to follow, but those are certainly all matters that we have already been discussing internally, and certainly we'll be looking to create an environment that is very attractive and safe for pedestrians and cyclists in particular. Unless anyone wants to tell me that we've missed out a question, I think we've come to the end of the questions. There's a few more coming in now. Sorry, they're being published while I'm looking here. So the local plan is under debate, question mark. Well, the local plan has been found sound by an independent inspector and adopted, although, as Ian Manxlow has already referenced in his introduction, there is a challenge that has been made, and we're going to obviously have to wait and see what happens in relation to that challenge. But for the time being, the local plan continues to carry full weight. And then, why did Rbwm decide in the BLP that only Maidenhead was suitable for tall buildings, and Windsor and Ascot will be spared? And I can see that Ian Motchell is typing as I speak a response to that post. Do you want to give a verbal response, Ian Motchell?
I'll give a verbal response. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Maidenhead, as a larger town, would have much more capacity to take taller buildings, albeit that have to be very carefully designed and to fit within the context of the area. But I don't think there's no moratorium on taller buildings in other parts of the borough, and certainly the policy that we have in the BLP, which is QP3A on taller buildings, certainly isn't confined purely to Maidenhead. So it relates to taller buildings across the borough, but we do feel that there probably is more capacity for taller buildings in central Maidenhead in particular, given that it is, has very good public transport links and so on, in terms of sustainability. That was all, really.
Thank you, Ian. Ian Manxlow, I think probably if we pause there and have your presentation, if there are any further questions that we haven't picked up, I can look through those while you're speaking, and we can pick them up at the end. I'll hand over to Ian Manxlow.
Yep, thank you very much, Ian. And I will just put the presentation back up. So apologies again that Chris can't be with us. I'll do my best to just run through his slides, and again, we'll do our best to answer the questions afterwards. Chris is kind of the expert on the kind of transport infrastructure side of things, so there may be a few more that we will need to follow up in writing afterwards. But let's just work through what he was going to say. So broadly, what we'll cover is the whole issue of connectivity, what we mean by that, why it's important, and then we'll go into kind of looking at different types of effectively transport connectivity, so walking and cycling and public transport. Touch on a couple of important sort of green corridors, important corridors that we're looking at as part of the work on the SPD, and then sort of finish with looking at the issue of vehicular traffic and some of those questions already coming in about the impact on the road network. And I'll just sort of wrap up by saying a little bit about how actual infrastructure is going to be funded through this process. So essentially, connectivity is all about people being able to get to the places where they need to go to. And it's actually really important from a well-being point of view, but also from a sustainability point of view. And I think we've had a kind of question about and a sort of commentary about the importance of having genuinely sustainable travel options as part of this development, and creating the right opportunities to build alternatives to the car is really important, and I think particularly important in the context of this site. And I think, and I guess one of the reasons why this site is in the plan is because of its location, its accessibility to the town centre, but also accessibility to other important areas nearby. So the leisure centre and the open space at Bradwood Park, Ockwells Park as well. They all provide facilities locally where people who will live in the new development will be able to access. So it's partly a locational thing and the importance of connectivity to what's around, but connectivity is going to be really important within the development as well. And actually connectivity to the local facilities that will be provided on the site is going to be particularly critical. So again, so that we can maximise the ability for people to walk and cycle and not get in the car, and so have those sustainable travel options. So if you tuned in last week, we touched a little bit about the importance of providing both a secondary school and a primary school on the site, and also local facilities in a local centre, community facilities, local shops and so on. And there were a few questions that kind of came through, and we'll be publishing the answers to those shortly, asking why we are providing those local facilities, particularly shops, when we have those in the town centre. And actually, it's really important that we do have some local facilities so people can easily walk to buy some of the essentials that they need, rather than be tempted to get in the car to go into the town centre or elsewhere. So actually, the site is really well placed to be well connected, both internally and beyond, to local facilities that people need to use on a day-to-day basis. And so this again is the plan I showed you earlier of the site in the area, and it just emphasises, I suppose, that locational advantage, if you like, of the site close to the town centre, close to Bradwood Park, close to Ockwells Park as well, and that those connections are going to be critical in terms of how development is brought forward on the site. The other connectivity issue that we are looking into further is the issue of getting from, to and from, or between the housing site and the employment site. So AL13, the housing site, AL14, the employment site, and obviously you have the A308M in between. Now the local plan talks about looking at the possibility or the feasibility of a bridge over the 308M to connect the two. We're doing some more work on that at the moment to generally, I suppose, look at the feasibility and desirability of that, whether that is the best option or whether there are other options that might be better from the point of view of ensuring particularly that the employment site is well connected into other parts of the town. So that's some work that we want to complete before we publish the draft SPD in the summer. So we're going to share a little bit more about the thinking on that when we've been through that piece of work, but perhaps important to know that. And I think there was a comment in the chat actually a little bit earlier about well, how will we connect the two? Is it a bridge, or is it an underpass, or is it some other way of doing that? And so that is a piece of work that we're looking at the moment. And clearly then looking at how we can improve the connections and those sort of desire lines to Bradwood Park and the Leisure Centre and to Ockwells Park on the other side of the A404M. Again, they are really important desire lines, as we call them. So obviously I'm talking to a large extent about walking and cycling at the moment, and the work we do and the proposals we come forward with in the SPD in relation to both those internal and kind of external walking and cycling connections will be fully kind of joined up with a piece of work that the council is doing on developing what's called a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, or LCWIP, to use a sort of short phrase or terminology. So that's a piece of work that Chris Joyce's team are working on at the moment, and they are understanding and developing what the real walking and cycling network is across the whole borough and including in Maidenhead, and what are the most important routes and desire lines from a walking and cycling perspective, and making sure that proposals that come forward in the South West Maidenhead area plug into that wider network in an effective way. So there is that strategic connection as well as that kind of local connection. So that's ensuring connections to key locations to the north, south, east and west. All points of the compass really are going to be important here from a walking and cycling point of view. Thinking Gillespie's already touched on the concept of a north-south green spine through the site. And this is a requirement, one of those requirements in the pro forma for the housing site. So this is just illustrated very diagrammatically on the slide here, connecting from the town centre right through the AL13 development site to that sort of southern green fringe area that Ian also briefly touched on in answering one of the earlier questions. And that green spine is kind of multifunctional really in terms of its role. So it is clearly about providing a high quality link through to the town centre, one which will prioritise sustainable movement, so particularly encouraging greater walking and cycling, so kind of behaviour change to encourage more walking and cycling. It will also provide good access to kind of the key activities, so some of those facilities on the site as well as off-site in the town centre to the north of the area, but so connecting into local services and schools and then jobs and shops that are a bit further afield as well. What it will also do though is enable different types of open spaces to be created along its length. So it's a connectivity thing, but it's also a recreational issue in terms of providing open space opportunities of different types along its length as well. And clearly by connecting through to that green area at the bottom as well, then it will create a length of walking, cycling opportunity through what is quite an extensive area of land. So ultimately it will contribute to creating a network of high quality footpaths and cycleways across the area and with those wider connections. Clearly what it will also do, and we'll touch on this again in the third session, is provide a green connectivity from a wildlife point of view, so wildlife connections as well, so wildlife can move across the area. We know there will be impacts from changing the area through development, but we want to create those green networks and wildlife corridors as well, and that green spine and wider green space network will contribute towards that. So that is one important corridor that we're looking at, and the SPD will want to develop the thinking on further. Another is the Harvest Hill Road corridor. So the Harvest Hill Road cuts through AL13, the housing site, between at the bottom end of the golf course, but the land to the south of that is also proposed for housing, the fields to the south, before you get to the A308M. And this is a key east-west corridor from kind of connectivity point of view. And it's really important that provides the right environment to support walking and cycling. So again, looking at how that corridor can support walking and cycling in particular, and ensure we get the permeability of movement kind of north-south as well across the that corridor. So it's east-west corridor, but we need to think about how we facilitate those north-south movements across Harvest Hill Road as well. So really important. Harvest Hill Road will also obviously be a point of vehicular access, so particularly into to the development areas of AL13 as well, and also into the local centre and the school, which will be on part of what is the current golf course area. So public transport and the integration of public transport is going to be really important too. So the borough has a bus service improvement plan for the area, and the SPD will set out some principles for how the site could be served by public transport. So the existing routes that pass the site that could be diverted via the development, and clearly new bus stops and priority infrastructure can be designed to kind of help to accommodate those services as well. So That's going to be a key element as to how we do accommodate public transport through the site and make it, again, attractive, and particularly being able to access the town centre directly through public transport if people choose not to walk and cycle. I said I'd come on to just touch on issues around the highway network. When the borough local plan was prepared, there was some detailed traffic modelling that tested the impact on the highway network of, well, the borough local plan as a whole and the various site development proposals, and it certainly tested the impact of the Southwest Maidenhead area, particularly the housing area, and also the employment area, AL14 as well. What's been happening recently is there have been a number of different junction improvements that have come out, not just of that work, but other work that the council's been undertaken. It's quite a small plan there, you can see, but a number of improvements have already taken place. Those are the green dots on the plan, particularly focused on the A4 area and one or two other areas too. There's also some improvements, highway improvements, that are being funded, particularly through the local enterprise partnership of funding a number of junction improvements. So perhaps the key one to mention there is the Braywick roundabout. So at the bottom of the A308M and its junction with Braywick Road, there is a funded scheme there. But as part of preparing the SPD, we're doing some more work looking again at the traffic modelling and testing whether the ideas for improvements of some of the other junctions in the area are the right ones, the right ideas. So we're just refining that work at the moment, and again we'll better provide a little bit more detail as to what the thinking is when we prepare and publish the draft SPD. But we anticipate improvements being also required at the Shopper and Hangers Road Norwich Drive junction, at the A404M, so that's the Thicket roundabout, the A308 Broadway junction, and also obviously there's the M4 junction 8-9, which is not responsibility of the council. That is obviously the National Highways, or what used to be called Highways England, who manage that junction, and we're obviously be in dialogue with them about what may be appropriate there. So there are a range of junctions that are either been improved, have some funding to be improved, or that will be required to be improved as a result of the impact of the development in the Southwest Maidenhead area. And as I say, we're working on that, and we'll share more of that when we publish the draft SPD in the summer. So just sort of wrapping up in terms of this section, key question here is really how does this transport infrastructure, but actually not just transport, the other infrastructure that will be required, such as the schools and the open space and those things as well, how will they actually be delivered? I guess it's important to highlight that there's an important role for this SPD really in terms of both determining the overall scope of the infrastructure that's required, to look at the overall cost, and hence and then the funding mechanisms to actually deliver them, and making sure that it's kind of coordinated in an effective way as well. And clearly there's some critical infrastructure here that needs to be delivered. So the timing of infrastructure delivery is an important consideration here as well. I mean, in terms of funding, there are several sort of sources that we be exploring. There is something called the Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL for short, and that is a levy that is already in place right across the borough that is charged mainly on housing development, but certain other forms of development too. It's effectively a tariff on housing development, and we will collect that tariff from all the housing development that would happen in the Southwest Maidenhead, and we expect a significant amount of funding to come forward from that source. There's also something called Section 106 agreements, which are legal agreements linked to the grant of a planning permission. They help to deliver individual pieces of infrastructure. They also deliver affordable housing to ensure that development provides the 30% affordable housing that's required on the housing area. And sometimes it can also require financial contributions to deliver infrastructure as well. So a combination of those two elements are going to be particularly important in terms of delivering infrastructure. together with other appropriate grant funding opportunities, investment that we may be able to plug into as well. So a number of different sources of infrastructure funding that we will be developing and exploring as part of this work. So that was essentially what I wanted to cover in terms of content. I mean, obviously we'd welcome your feedback on all these issues, but perhaps some questions for you just to think about, both for feedback this evening, but also through the online form where you'll see these questions as well in the form as well. But you know, have we considered all the key design lines and the important kind of connectivity points requirements that I've just sort of outlined? Are there other ones we should be considering? And are there other local infrastructure needs that we need to be captured? And what other measures need to be considered for the development proposals within the SPD, particularly infrastructure measures? So do consider those questions. We'll welcome any comments in the chat bar now, but also using the form online. So at that point, we'll go back to the chat bar and I'll hand back to Ian Gillespie to just go through any additional questions that have come in.
Thank you very much, Ian. There are some further questions that have come in. So the first one is around the scope for any further improvements in terms of pedestrian and cycle links between the golf course and the leisure centre. And I'm not sure whether the author of that question was concerned about the cyclists and pedestrians having to wait for the cars to be stopped, or whether they were concerned about the cars having to stop and wait for all of the pedestrians and cyclists crossing the road. That there aren't worked up proposals for those improvements at the moment, but we will be looking at that further through the SPD process to see what further improvements can be made to make it a safer and more convenient crossing for pedestrians and cyclists, but also making sure that the traffic flows aren't impacted significantly as a result of multiple pressing of the pedestrian crossing button. Then a very specific question about whether there will be a right turn from Shopping Hangers Road into Braywick Road. That's obviously a movement that can't be made at the moment. I'm not aware that forms part of the accessibility package for Southwest Maidenhead. I don't know whether either of the Ians are aware of any proposals there. I've got head shaking here, I think. So no, I don't think we are looking to introduce a right turn option there. Yes, an amusing comment, I think, or question there around why do we always show photographs of people walking and cycling in the sunshine rather than when they also have to do it on the wet and snowy days. Yeah, good point. Then moving on to opportunities for car sharing within Southwest Maidenhead, and the importance also of adequate cycle storage, not just for standard bikes, but also for non-standard bikes. And I think that's the sort of tag-alongs and also those that have the storage facility in a sort of supersized basket at the front of the bike. So in terms of car sharing, that's certainly something that we will be looking at. I think one of the issues there is making sure that there is dedicated parking provision for those cars that are available to rent on a short-term basis. We've certainly already had lots of internal discussions around cycle parking, particularly along this green spine and at key destinations in terms of the local centre and also the schools, areas of open space. But we'll also need to look at the cycle parking provision beyond the site. And I know that additional cycle parking was provided at the station, and it may well be that even more cycle parking is required in due course. But I think the question there is also around making sure that there's adequate and convenient cycle storage associated with the new housing on the site and for the flatted development, so that those who don't have a car have somewhere safe to keep their bikes. And again, that's certainly something that we're looking at and we can take away. There's then a question around what has been delivered at the Rbwm Leisure Centre, and that perhaps isn't a cycle and pedestrian friendly environment and perhaps too car dominated, and that's certainly something that we will take away in terms of a comment and see whether we can do better, as it were, at Southwest Maidenhead. Will there be vehicular access onto Shopping Hangers Road on the western side from AL13? Where will it be exactly? It hasn't been determined where that access point will be, but I think it's very likely to be in either in the same location or a very similar location to the existing access into the golf club parking and clubhouse area. And then a concern around accessibility to Ockwells Park and a question about how long it takes to get from central Maidenhead down to Ockwells Park. There will be open space provision within Southwest Maidenhead itself, which clearly will be more accessible to central Maidenhead. I think the idea is that Ockwells Park will be a large area of green space that will be accessible to those living at Southwest Maidenhead, in and around the local centre, around Harvest Hill Road, and certainly south of Harvest Hill Road. I think from just north of Harvest Hill Road, it's probably about a kilometre's walk down to Ockwells Park, which is probably a sort of 10 to 15 minute walk for the average person. So I think on a sunny day, that's a very achievable distance for an afternoon in Ockwells Park. Then a question around the widening of Harvest Hill Road and whether that is going to result in the loss of even more trees and mature hedgerows. Ian Manxlow, I don't know whether you want to say a little bit about some of the initial work we've been doing to look at that corridor.
Yes, thank you, Ian. Yeah, I suppose the focus of the work has actually been looking at the scope for walking and cycling opportunities along that corridor. That doesn't necessarily mean widening the road itself. It could potentially be an off-road option, but making sure that there is really good walking cycling connectivity along that road. So we're conscious, obviously, there is extensive hedgerows on either side of the road, and so that is part of the consideration as to if you are going to provide effectively a dedicated walk cycle opportunity along there, then the precise alignment of that in relation to trees and hedgerows is going to be an important consideration. So we're aware of the issue, and I think it's helpful that you flag that up, because it's clearly a concern, as is also providing the opportunity for walking and cycling. So thank you. Yeah.
We've got another comment around safe storage for bikes, with bike theft being a big problem in and around Maidenhead. And also a helpful comment that on one of our plans in the slides, we're missing a green dot, so we'll pick that up before we publish the slides. And then there's a question around the various documents that are being produced by the council and how they all sort of fit together, and when there'll be opportunities to comment. I'm sure we can publish something on that, but Ian Motchell, do you want to say a few words on that one?
Sorry, Ian, I was in the middle of responding to a question. Can you just
Oh.
say it again? Sorry.
So sorry, and so there's a question that's been asked around the various SPDs and other documents that the council is producing at the moment.
Okay.
And really the question is there going to be an opportunity to look at those documents? Where are they? And is there an opportunity to comment on a draft? And I think you wanted to say something on that.
Sure, I did, absolutely. Yes, we do need to prepare a number of supplementary planning documents to provide more detail on the local plan, and obviously the South West Maidenhead SPD is the first one that's coming forward since the BLP was adopted. There will be a number of others produced. The building heights and tall buildings SPD is likely to be the next one, hopefully published for consultation in the next few months. And there are others that we want to produce. One of the most important ones is the sustainability and climate change SPD, which we committed to producing at the full council meeting. So obviously we can't unfortunately produce them all instantly. We are a relatively small planning policy team, and we want to be producing those over the next couple of years or so. We don't have a firm timetable at the moment for those, and we are in the process of looking at the timetabling and the prioritisation for those SPDs, and hopefully before too long we will have some firmer information that we can share on the timescales for those, but it isn't available at the moment. But we are we are aware that they're needed. But I think the important thing to stress is that the borough local plan does in itself provide a lot of detail. So even without SPDs, there's still a lot of useful requirements and other information in the BLP that can be used to guide planning applications as they come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Ian Manktelow?
Sorry, I preempted you. I was just suggesting I'd pick up the next question on SIL.
Just before you do, Ian, I was just going to add to what Ian Motchell has just said, because I think maybe the question was also around the LC WIP and the bus improvement plan, along with the SPDs, etc. So I think probably we can publish, if it would be helpful, a very brief table referencing these various publications that we've mentioned in this presentation this evening, where we have got a timetable indicating where we are with timing for these documents, and whether there's an opportunity for public comment, and if so, when. And we can publish that on our website, so that will all be in one place. Right, sorry, Ian Manktelow, then we have a question on SIL, and that isn't SIL, sorry, the SIL isn't in place in the town centre unless that's changed.
No, that's correct. The SIL is not charged in the town centre sort of area, so there are certain developments that would happen in the town centre that are not SIL chargeable. But what we have in terms of the rates that we charge are different zones across the borough in terms of SIL. So Maidenhead town centre is 0 rated. The urban area then has a level which is basically £122 per square metre for residential development, and then the rest of the borough, which does include the main AL13 housing allocation because it's outside of the urban area, would be charged at a much higher rate, which is £295 per square metre. So and what we do is we index link those rates each year to a specific index, and so over time those will change depending on effectively the rate of inflation for building. So in terms of the development to the South West Maidenhead area, then there's quite a high SIL charging level that would apply in that area.
Thank you, Ian. We've then got a question on connectivity by public transport. Ian Manxlow has already referenced the bus improvement plan. I'm afraid without Chris Joyce here, we're probably a little bit light on the detail, but certainly within the development itself, we will be looking to make sure that there are opportunities for buses to service the southwest Maidenhead area. I suspect principally through the development and along Harvest Hill Road, but we haven't got the details without Chris here this evening. So perhaps, Ian Manxlow, that's one that we can pick up in our written responses to the questions after this session.
Yes, we'll do that. Yes, thank you.
We've then got a very specific question around the need to start measuring air pollution properly, and that's not being undertaken at the moment. Again, without wanting to duck the question, I'm afraid that's not the area of expertise for those that are on the call this evening, but we will certainly respond to that in writing after this session, unless there's anybody that's got anything they wish to add on that point. No, we have no experts on that, I'm afraid, here this evening, so we'll have to provide a written response. Another comment around the theft of bicycles being an issue. Again, I'm afraid is lowly planners and designers. I'm not sure about the how that crime is being tackled. I suspect that's a matter for the police, again beyond our direct remit, I'm afraid. And then we have a question, are you saying that everyone will have to drive through the town, affecting traffic going to the new shopping centre? I don't think we are saying that. I think we're trying to do as much as we can to encourage people to use sustainable modes of transport and to access the town centre facilities and services on foot and by bike. And we recognise that not everybody is going to be doing that, but that's part of the reason for the strategic highway modelling that's being undertaken, to look at where the traffic impacts are likely to be and which junctions need to be improved. And then there's a follow-up question, I think, around the issue of not being able to turn right out of shopping hangars and the issues that creates. Again, I'm afraid that's something that we can't answer in detail without Chris Joyce being here, but we will pick that question up in our written responses. And then there's a question around the timing of the climate and environment SPD, and whether that's going to be in place before the first planning permissions for AL13 are submitted. Ian Motchell, I don't know whether there's anything you can say in terms of the potential timing for the climate and environment SPD.
Just I can say a little bit, Ian. We are aiming to try to get the sustainability SPD finalised and adopted by Cabinet by the end of the year. That's the current aim, and we're investigating different mechanisms to see how we can achieve that. But in the and in terms of will it be ready before the applications start coming in? Well, I can't say. I don't know exactly when planning applications will start coming in for the development on this site. So it's almost impossible for me to answer that. I mean, I think all we can say is we're trying to do our best to get this SPD progressed as quickly as we can. And in the meanwhile, there is an interim sustainability guidance note that's been prepared and is on the website that is already having quite a lot of positive impact in persuading developers to be more sustainable in their developments.
Thank you, Ian. And then I think the final question at the moment then is I've been corrected here in terms of the planner's role in designing out crime and reducing crime, and certainly in terms of Southwest Maidenhead and new developments where we have an opportunity to ensure that there's natural surveillance over areas where bikes are being stored, and that we can require or encourage appropriate storage for bikes, etc. There is certainly a role for the planners in making sure that happens. I guess what I was saying is where bikes are being stolen from outside shops and elsewhere in the town at the moment, it's more difficult for planners to influence that because there is no development taking place in some of those areas, and therefore there isn't the opportunity to do anything about existing issues with crime through planning means. And that's why I made reference to the police. I think that is the end of the questions that I've picked up. Are there any that have been missed? Anybody else on our side thinks we've missed any of the questions? No. Handing back over to you, Ian Maximo.
Yes, thanks very much, Ian. I'll just share a couple of slides to close just on the next steps that we'll be taking with the SPD. And hopefully you can see that now on the screen. So what we're aiming to do over the next couple of months, 2 to 3 months, is to start preparing the draft SPD. We'll obviously look in detail at the comments that have been made both in these sessions, and we'll get through on the through the online form as well. And we'll also be discussing those issues and the emerging SPD with, I suppose, some key technical stakeholders over the next month or two to help inform the detail that will go into the SPD. The aim then is to take that draft document to the Council's Cabinet to agree to put out for public consultation in the summer. So that will be in July and the first half of August. So normally an SPD has a kind of 4-week consultation period. We're conscious that this would be taking us into the start of the summer holidays, so we'll allow a longer period of time for comments on that document, and certainly we will be putting on more events to help to explain the content of the SPD. We'll then obviously consider all the issues that have come through that consultation and look at how we should update the SPD, taking account of the comments that we've received, and we'll be aiming to finalise the document during the autumn. The precise timing will depend really on the issues that do come out from the consultation and the work that we need to do on the back of that to update the SPD. But clearly the intention is to produce this document in partnership and consultation with yourselves and the key stakeholders and the landowners and promoters as well. It's important that we talk to them too, so they understand our aspirations for the area, you know, to inform the planning applications that they will bring forward. So really just a reminder, one more event next week, the Sustainability and Environment session, somewhat later start time of 7:15, so do join us for that. And again, a reminder to put any further comments you'd like to make on any of these issues or using the online web form, and you'll be able to access that web form through the link you can see there, and other information including those FAQs that I mentioned earlier as well. So the deadline for comments is the 27th of April. So at this point I will just hand back to Councillor Hazler just to say 1 or 2 things in closing.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'd just like to finish off by thanking everyone for their constructive questions and contributions this evening. It's been very beneficial indeed, and we certainly do want to hear what you've got to say. And please, as Ian's just outlined, please do join us again for the 3rd and final session of the SPD process next week for sustainability and environment. That is going to be a key session. The link will be posted on the council website, so please take a look at that. And remember to share your comments on the council website again. If your questions haven't been answered tonight, they will be answered in writing. And I'd just like to finish off by thanking everybody, especially the planning team, the residents who contributed tonight, and just everybody else that has helped with this process. And I'll just bid you a good night, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, everyone.